2020. We're back again for week 5. Remember, next week is a relaxation week from university, obviously not from work, we all are. So prepare to have a rest from all this stuff. This week, we're just going to have a look at industry practice, and basically we're just going to recap on what licensing is. Most of you will be working in or about to work in construction or design somehow, and if you're in various states, there are licensing requirements, especially Queensland, as we know quite well here. First question to ask ourselves, and I hope a lot of you know this anyway, is what is a license? The definition of a license comes from Legal Aid Queensland's website. It's an authority from government which allows a person to do a particular thing as long as they observe the conditions of that authority. So drive a car, carry on a business, sell alcohol. Think driving a car, you can have your license will only allow you to ride a bike or a certain capacity until so long you've done it, or you can drive a car, or you can drive a truck. There's different levels of license. Other types of licenses which come into more of the stuff we're thinking of really. Obviously you have licenses to use software, you buy it, but obviously you need a license to operate different types of machinery, equipment, use certain tools. You would see that on construction sites, etc. all the time, and you should be asking for those people's licenses in pre-site induction. The regulations at the present time, we've got the National Construction Code, federally the ABCC. We quite often refer to it as the BCA, Building Code of Australia. Building Acts, each state has its own act, and there's also the federal one above those. So if you look at, say, the National Construction Code, BCA, you'll see in the back of each of those volumes, there's the addendums for each individual state. Obviously, states like Queensland have got cyclone requirements, whereas if you go down to Victoria, New South Wales, ACT, they'll have particular requirements for snow loading on roofs, which obviously Queensland doesn't need. So you have to be aware of the individual ones there. There's a register, so the state or the territory, they will maintain a register of who is qualified to do certain things, and the members of the public or other professionals can ring that to check on someone. The registers are normally not free, they're normally making profit, so there's a charge to be on it and a charge for searching it quite often. There's a planning and building register, local councils will hold those. At the moment we try to gauge what the benefit is to the community. I'm not sure it's going too well really, but all this bureaucracy and that, does it benefit the community at all? i.e. does it protect them? If you're a member of the public or you're a client, does it protect you from shoddy workmanship and professional advice? And that protection could be the form of insisting that people have to have professional indemnity insurance, public liability insurance, and there's a tribunal system to try and, like a dispute resolution, to try and avoid full legal action or disagreement. And by having your licenses for doing everything, generally it builds confidence in the public. I'm not sure that's true though. There's the public licenses, but then you get, as in certifiers nowadays, most of those are private. Are they as good as they used to be when they were only provided by the local authority? And of course, does it give any operational cost and value to the community? Well, obviously, councils, state governments, that make a bit of money out of this, so there may be a community benefit there. Whether it's value for money, after my recent contacts with Victoria State Government and the Victoria Licensing Lot, the VBA, I would argue there's no value whatsoever. And also there's education, there's minimum education requirements. You can educate young people to become tradesmen and whatever. A regulatory example, and because we're based in Queensland, we're going to use the Queensland Building and Construction Commission, the QBCC. It's only a few years ago that it wasn't called that. It was the Queensland Building Services Authority, the BSA, but that was replaced at the end of 2013 with this new one. It's got a board, so there's a chairman and 6 members, and they do rotate on a time basis. They report directly, as the QBCC reports directly to the Minister of Public Works and Housing of Queensland State Government. The contact between the two is a commissioner. He has quite strong powers. And they operate within a mandate. And when they were set up, they were given a 10-point action plan that they were to achieve. And those points, several are very pertinent to us. Obviously, the first one was to replace the Queensland BSA and establish a new entity called the Queensland Building and Construction Commission. Well, we can all agree they've managed to do that. They were to install a professional governing body with appropriate committees and establish an appropriate commission structure with functional business units headed up by their own general managers. And if you go on to the website for the QBCC, you can see that structure is in place. The committees are made up of industry and professional representatives. They're not employees of it. They've got to establish appropriate mechanisms of review, so there's a certain amount of probity going on internally. Reviewed current domestic building contracts. There was a lot of loopholes in those, with a view to ensuring a balance between the interests of the homeowner or client and the builder. Try to sit on the fence between the two, be impartial. One that's interesting for us is reviewing licensing and the education, training and the compliance. Compliance with your license is a big issue. We all see people undertaking works on sites which doesn't comply with certain things. It either doesn't comply technically or it doesn't comply with their working safety or whatever. Review the licensing being undertaken. So education is what we're doing at the moment, and the QBCC sets the minimum educational requirements to be able to get a license for certain things, and they have training, so you normally have to have at least 2 years recognised on-the-job training signed off by employers before you can actually get a reasonable license. They are aimed and they were tasked with developing improved education and training processes for homeowners and consumers. These are the owner builders. And in conjunction with review of the Building Construction Industry Payments Act, where contractors and subcontractors, especially subcontractors, were not getting paid on time, they are aimed to develop and implement a rapid domestic adjudication model so they could fast track the response timelines. There are set legal timelines you have to make payments within. Retain the Queensland Home Warranty Scheme, keep it under government ownership. Review the scheme, of course, to try and provide a better definition and make it clearer for people to understand what it actually is and covers. And to review the role of private certifiers. There's been a lot of issues with these, with emphasis on probity, conflicts of interest, quality, and to try to come up with appropriate penalty regime for failure to perform. You could say that the certifier is one of the most important stages in a construction process, because they're actually signing off that the building is safe. I mean, think how people are feeling that are signed off on that Grenfell Tower in London, because Britain does have certifiers as well, stating that all the materials were compliant and it was safe, and now you've got nearly 100 people who died in that now. The same things are existing in Australia, so how did a non-compliant material slip through and get certified? Is this a case of certifiers just relying on all the Form 7s, 16s, 15s that the actual contractors are certifying themselves? Seems to be a weak point, possibly. And they aim to expand the licensing role of the Queensland Building Construction Commission. So Big Brother gets bigger. General categories, and there are hundreds of these, and I'm only picking the few ones that are most relevant to us. There's the occupational ones, so fire protection, pest control, anything specialised that can have a licence. There's obviously the trade licences, plumber, electrician, carpenter, that sort of stuff. The residential building inspection, you can go and look up the standard if you wish to. You've got access to all these through the library. Building design, and they've got various levels of building design from low rise to medium rise to quite high. I went a couple of weeks ago to the Queensland Annual Building Designers Awards night, representing the uni, and it was quite impressive, some of the buildings that were being given awards, and some were really big, and they weren't residential, they were mixed commercial, residential, industrial. There's the restricted builder's licenses. So, you know, you get someone to come and fit a new kitchen, they should have a license. Someone constructs a pool, puts a pool fence up, they should have a license. They get the fit out. They've got special licenses for that. And these go on and on and on. So there's only a number of them. These are all available to view if you go to the QBCC website. Builders, they have 3 different levels of builder can be. Low risers doing houses up to 2 stories, medium rise, and then there's the open, which is anything. You can build any. You build a nuclear reactor, I suppose. Silly example, but you can build big things with that. Building certifiers are also split down into 3 levels, which sort of tie up with the builder's levels. So building and certified licenses. The certifiers licenses are going to be in red to try and make it clearer for you. So builder's license, low rise. Building Code of Australia, class 1 and 10 buildings. Up to, but not more than 2,000 square metres. But you can't do type A and Bs. And you want to know what these are, then you need to go and look up the BCA. Actually, if you just type into the QBCC website, it's got all of the classifications there. The certifier for that is a level 3 certifier. Seems a bit strange that class 1 low-rise builder isn't level 1 BCA for the classification, but it doesn't work. It's the other way around. So level 3, and they can certify class 1 and 10s only. Your more experienced builders, medium rise, classes 1, 10, 2, 9, just as before, but they can get up to 3 stories. They can do type B now, but not type A. And type A, they can do classes 4 and 9. The certifier for that is a level 2 certifier, and he can certify the same things, but not more than 2,000 square metres again, which gets a bit tricky when you start to get to something reasonable size and it's 3 stories. And then there's the open builders one, no restriction, you can do what you like. And a level 1 certifier, no restriction, can certify anything. But to be able to do all these levels, you need the relevant technical knowledge, i.e. education, whether you get away with just a diploma or you have to have a degree or whatever. And you have to have the right amount of experience signed off in a logbook. And you have to carry your own professional indemnity insurance in case you make a mistake. At least the client is covered. You also, we don't mention it because it's not covered on this, but you would obviously have your public indemnity as well. Responsibilities, contractor, you can supervise, you can nominate other people like subcontractors, and you can undertake contracts. Nominee, supervisor, so you may be an independently employed specialist supervisor, but the main contractor is nominated and employed, so you can supervise, but you can then nominate a site supervisor if you want to. But of course they can then supervise a fire occupational. That's someone who's responsible just for the fire stuff. So notice that everybody's relying on tiny specializations here. You can have a superintendent, project manager, and if he's supervising, he needs a license. A quantity surveyor, if supervising, he needs a license. And a building certifier, as we noticed there with the 3 levels of licenses that they hold. Now, in your opinion, and it's interesting, you need to think about these, does the system work? Does this current licensing system actually work? And you might have to have a look at some past case law maybe, or have a look through the old newspapers, Google them, try and find out, does it actually work? But who does it protect? Does it protect the practitioner, you? Or does it protect the public? Now, we said earlier on that the QBCC, in the licensing scheme which they're responsible for, but the QBCC is meant to try and balance between the two and be impartial. Do you think it's impartial? Bearing in mind the QBCC is partly funded by contractors and professionals' fees. And a lot of the staff that they have and inspectors are builders. So I'm not sure if there's a conflict of interest there. Does the system cater for innovation? I don't really know whether I can't say too much on that because I'd lead you too far possibly. But most bureaucracies are quite slow to react to things. So does the QBCC, does licensing lead the way, or is it kind of catch up with innovation? Could self-regulation work? Leave it to the market. You've got a slight degree of that with the certifiers, but not a lot. Other countries tend to have professional bodies, which is self-regulation. Europe's quite big on that. I'm a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. They self-regulate us in the UK, most of Europe. Where could you make enhancements in the future? What could you try for? Think of a 5-year and then a 10-year plus horizon. What could you change in those two time periods if you think anything needs to be enhanced? Status of the course at the moment. Well, thank you very much. You've all submitted your assessment number ones and they're waiting to be marked. I'm working through the unit that was submitted on Monday night. There's 110 of those to mark, and then I'll be looking at yours. So you're probably at least a week and a bit away from me beginning to look at your ones. So don't chase me yet. Assessment 2, there's some research to do for that. You need to be thinking of this one, looking at 2 tasks. Don't leave it to the last minute. Just do it gently and gradually. Next week's a midterm break, so we don't have any lecture and we don't have a tutorial next week. So maybe you'll just spend a few hours doing some research for assessment number 2, or maybe you'll just catch up with work, or just have some fun with your families. Whatever you do, but have a good week off. And if you've got questions, as always, put them in the Q&A forum so we can all look at them and answer them. And I leave you with another one of my photographs. That's a theatre on a cruise ship. Anybody who's technical into photography, that's actually 6 separate images stitched together, and then several hours of editing in Photoshop to get the exposures and everything right. You can see I got carried away. You can see all the stuff up in the dark area. And then I went off and had several cocktails and couldn't hold the camera still. So have a good week off next week, and I'll get around to marking the assignments as quickly as I can for you. Okay? So thanks for listening, and I'll